we cope when all things seem to be so lost? We're hearing news reports of all sorts of things happening around the globe, even locally in our neighbourhood, city, or nation. As this is happening, it's actually really important for us as believers to be sure that we take out time and ask God, what would you have to say about this? What do I need to be praying about this? How should I be viewing what is happening? How do I see it through your eyes of love? We then need to lean back into what Paul teaches us at Philippians 4:6-8. Pray and petition with thanksgiving, and then let God know what you're concerned about. And as you do, peace will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. And then once done, we can continue to focus on all the good that is going on around us, regardless of what is going on. So let me unpack some of that, because then I want to give you an example of David doing this in 1 Samuel 30, and also how I've had to do this multiple times in my own life. So it's not something that I'm just talking about here online. It's actually something that I have lived out and have struggled with, and it's not always as easy as it sounds, but as we keep on choosing to do it, I think that faith muscle does actually grow. So how do we cope when all seems lost? Well, as I said, when things seem to be going awry in our life, our personal lives, or even globally, which is what seems to be happening right now, we must ask God, what is it that's going on? A beautiful situation, or a beautiful example in the scriptures, is of David in 1 Samuel 30. What we find is that David and his mighty men have been rejected by the Philistine army, that they said, look, we want to fight for you against the Israelites, and they're rejected. They come back to Ziklag, and they find that all of their wives, their children, and all of their livestock have been stolen. And it actually reads there that David and the men wept until they had no strength left to weep. They were absolutely grief struck. It was like the worst day at the office, so to speak. So we read that at 1 Samuel 30 verse 4. But it gets even worse for David, because then the mighty men turn on him and say, this is your fault. This is your fault that everything has happened. What do you have to say about this, David? So David is left without friends, without support. His wife, his children, his livestock are all gone. He's been rejected by the Philistine army, and he's been rejected, or he's been hunted down by Saul to be killed. So he's in this awful, awful situation. I don't know if many of us have ever been in that sort of situation. I know a few refugees that I've acted for that have been in a similar situation. But aside from that, generally speaking, most of us have never had that level of angst happen in our lives. Well, what does he do in that situation? He's cried until he can cry no more. But then what he does is he gets up and he inquires of the Lord. He asks God, what do I do next? And he's told, you know what, go after them. Surely you will be successful. Go after them. And what actually ends up happening in that moment, or on the way, so he obeys immediately. And then what happens along the way is he stops for a complete stranger and performs a random act of kindness, or an act of random kindness. I like to call them arc moments. So he actually stops for the one on his way in the midst of his own distress. He stops on the way and he helps someone. It's like the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, that stops and helps the complete stranger. So David stops and helps a complete stranger, and it's that stranger that says, I know what has happened. I was the slave that was associated with the people that stole all of your wives and your children and your livestock. And he then points the way for them to be able to recover all that was lost. And it goes on to talk about all of the blessings that happen, that all of the bad things that actually happen, everything comes together for good, because David loved his God. So what ends up happening is that he doesn't fight in the war. That's good, because the Philistinians would have actually tried to make him fight. Was it the Amalekites? I'm not sure. Anyway, they would have made him kill Saul. So he was actually stopped from having to raise his hand against God's anointed. And ultimately, he does walk into his prophetic promise of becoming king. So what we see is that through all situations, if we can just see through the kingdom lens and pray, being aware of the problem, but seeking the redemptive purpose of God and the purpose that he has in mind, and then release that with our prophetic prayers and our decrees, release that with our mindsets, even with our words of encouragement, encourage one another that it's going to be okay, that God's got this all worked out. If we will only stand firm when all else seems rocky, and then keep ourselves in a place of hope, because as believers, we should be the most hope-filled people on the planet. As we do that, we will bring hope, but we'll also stand firm when all else seems to be falling apart. It's so important. I love what Paul does as I started, what Paul talks about in Philippians 4:6-8. He says, be anxious for nothing, but with prayer, supplications, and thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. So it's not like you pretend nothing wrong is happening. You say, this is everything that's happening, God. I'm worried about this. Would you please deal with it? This is too much for me. You take it on, please, God. It's far too much for me to take care of. And you hand it to him, but you let him know what you're concerned about. But we do it with thanksgiving. And that might be as simple as looking at something on a walk and going, my gosh, God, look at that beautiful flower, look at that amazing sunset, or whatever it is. Like, we actually go to that really basic place of finding at least one thing to be thankful for. There will be something that you can be thankful for. It's one of the most challenging and confronting situations was when I was working for refugees that had escaped heinous crimes. And I would say to them, what one thing are you thankful for? As I was writing down their statements and crying myself with them at the horrendous things that they had to live through. So you find something to be thankful for, and you let God know, I'm thankful for this, I'm thankful for that. And the peace that surpasses all knowledge and understanding will guard our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. Our feelings might say that we're not peaceful, but peace, the person, Jesus Christ, the person will. And as we discipline our thoughts and we keep on aligning them with what God has to say about it, we can find ourselves becoming calmer and calmer and calmer. And then what happens is that we can then stay in that place of hope, and we can bring hope to others. And this is the way that we do this. I mean, Paul says to us, after we've done all of that, then he says, stand and focus on all that is noteworthy and pure and wonderful and joyful. It's all about that basic pattern of, this is what's going on, God. I don't know what to do. Inquiring of the Lord, strengthening ourselves. And we do that. Sometimes it might be through worship, or through getting in the Bible and reading the scriptures, or just simply getting around a positive, spirit-filled friend who can see through the lens of the kingdom better than you might be able to in that particular situation. So we have running partners that can bring hope to what seems like a hopeless situation. We can sit quietly and spend time with God. And what we can also do is we can bring to remembrance all of the other times that he has come through for us. And this is something that I started doing as a young Christian. Right back when I first believed, I would remind myself of all the things that God had done in the past, so that I would become strong in my faith. I didn't realize what it was that I was doing until I read a few books and started to understand 1 Samuel 30, but I was doing what David was doing. I was strengthening myself in the Lord. I was going back and reminding myself of all the goodness that had actually happened before, and where God had come through for me in the past. So that's essentially what we do. This is how we get through. This is how we cope when all things seem lost. And this is how I coped just recently, when in the span of about 24 months, I had my mother passed away, my sister passed away, my auntie passed away, my uncle passed away. And there was grief, and there was a lot of loss and sadness. And I just kept on focusing with absolute desperation at times on what God had to say about it all. And in the end, it all came through. It was all okay, even though the grief was still there. So we strengthen ourselves in the Lord, and we keep on being aware of what God's asking us to do, just like David did. He got himself together after crying and crying and crying, and he went out and he started doing what he needed to do. He stopped for the one on the way as he was doing it, and God gave him further keys to have everything that was stolen restored. So I hope that encourages you a little bit. I'm running next week, I'm running a 3-day free workshop to teach you how to discover that you already hear God's voice. It's a matter of learning how to recognize it. It is free. There is 1 hour per day over 3 days. And you get access to the recording for free for 7 days. If you want that recording permanently, there is a fee charged of $17. You need to sign up for that before we start training because it goes up afterwards. And that helps cover some of our costs to do this. And by way of saying thank you, you get an extra 1 hour every day of Q&A, activation, and that community time of coaching. So I hope you join me. The reason why I do these free trainings is because I am passionate about helping people see that God is speaking to us today, that we can hear his voice. He is speaking all the time to us through the scriptures and through other means. It's a matter of learning to recognize how we hear him as we go about our day. He is speaking. He's drawing you into his embrace, and he's saying, come by my side. I've got sweet nothings to tell you, but I've also got strategies, plans, and a hope-filled future for you to step into as well. So come join me. The link is in the